Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is Mrs. Gallagher, and today we're going to discuss analyzing scatter plots. So when you graph data on a scatter plot, the scatter plot may show important features about the data. The two features are known as clustering and outliers. So let's look at the key vocabulary that you need to know. Clustering. Clustering is when data values occurring are close together. So clustering is when data values occurring, it's close together. So if you look at the scatter plot below, this is an example of clustering. An outlier is a data point is far away from the other data points. So your outlier is a data point that's far away from the other data sets. So looking at that scatter plot, you have one point right here that's not with the other data sets. That is called an outlier. So that is an example of an outlier. All right, let's look at the first question. What is the outlier of this data set? Well, we just discussed it. It's right here. And what coordinate is that? That is 0.6. And it's in between 70 and 80, closer to 80. So I would say that's coordinate. It's about 676. It's definitely 6, and it's about 76. So now let's look at the second question. Describe the clustering that you see in the graph. All right, so the scatter plot is telling us we have days of experience, and the more days of experience, we have a higher number of bouquets made. I also noticed that on the first day, we have about the same number of bouquets made. Also true for the second day. So basically, the more experience you have, the more bouquets that you make. So the more days of experience, the more bouquets are made. Okay, the more days of experience, the more bouquets are made. So when we talk about scatter plots, we also discuss an association with scatter plots. An association is the relationship between the two variables. So it's the relationship between the two variables. Sometimes you may hear association be called a correlation as well. So an association may also be referred to as a correlation. Let's look at our first association in example 1. When both data sets increase together. And when they both increase together, this is called a positive association. So the first example is a positive association, where both sets of data increase together. Example 2 is when one data set increases, so one increases and the other decreases. This is called a negative association. So when one data increases, the other decreases, it is a negative association. And lastly, sometimes data sets are not related. And when they're not related, the data is scattered everywhere. That is called no association. So that is called no association when the data is not related. Let's look at some examples of a positive, negative, and no association. Remember, it can also be referred to as a correlation. So in these 3 questions, it's asking, what would you expect a positive association, a negative association, or no association between the two sets of data? Let's look at number 1, the amount of free time you have and the number of classes you take. So this example would be a negative association. This is a negative association because the more free time you have, that indicates the less classes you are taking. So that's a negative association. Let's look at number 2, the sales of snow shovels and the amount of snowfall. This would be considered a positive association. This is a positive association because the more snowfall you have, the higher the sales of snow shovels. You need shovels when it snows more. And then number 3, the length of a baby at birth and the month in which the baby was born. That is no association. This would be no association. The data is not related. It does not matter. The month the baby is born is not related to how long the baby is at birth. Now let's look at strong versus weak associations. We can also analyze scatter plots with a strong versus weak association. A strong association indicates that the data points cluster is a predictable pattern. So strong association, the data cluster indicates a predictable pattern. A weak association, the data points cluster loosely in a pattern that is less predictable. So it's a weak association, it's a loose data pattern. So let's look at some examples of different associations. When we have a strong positive association, your data is close together. So your data is close together. So for example, your scatter plot, your data is close together and it's going positive, it's going uphill. Both variables are positive. They're increasing together. Okay, so next is a weak positive. And a weak positive, they're also going uphill. It's a positive relationship. They're both increasing, but they're not as close together. So a weak positive, it's not as close together. So they're more loose. Both variables are increasing, but they're not as close together. The next is no association, and this is when the scatter plot is scattered. So our coordinates are scattered. The data is not related whatsoever. There's no correlation or association. And it looks like that. All right, the next one is a strong negative. And the strong negative, again, it's close and it's going downhill where one variable is increasing as the other is decreasing. So a strong negative is one variable is decreasing while the other is increasing, and it is close together, like that. And then the last one is a weak negative, and again, it's not as close together, and it's also going downhill. So it's not as close, and it's downhill. So it looks something like this. Okay, so now we're going to talk about linear versus nonlinear association. So linear versus nonlinear association, also may be called a correlation. A strong linear means it forms a line. The scatter plot forms a line. So the scatter plot is going to look something like this. It looks like a straight line. And it looks something like that. Okay, so that would be a strong linear. A strong nonlinear is it forms a shape of a parabola. Okay, remember a parabola is a U-shaped figure. So when you have a nonlinear, it looks like this, like a curve. Okay, so that would be a strong nonlinear association. So after we discuss the different types of associations, also known as correlations, I would like you to complete numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we will discuss it in class. Thank you.